So on today's Academy lesson, we're going to talk about something that I find very, very important in the world of magic, and that is how to best read books. Now, in my experience, there are two different types of books that you could encounter when you're learning magic and when you're finding different books to read. You're going to have beginner's books, or you're going to have books that are catered more towards teaching you the mechanics and the basics of magic, and you're going to have standard books which show you different effects and the methods for said effects. Now, in the beginner books, you're also probably going to have a section where it's dedicated to just tricks and just effects. However, the bulk of the book is sleight of hand and moves that are going to aid in those future tricks. So those are the two different types of books I've encountered in my magic life, I guess. And then you have the biographies and you have other books that are magic related, but don't necessarily have methods or just weird hybrids of both. But in this video, I'm going to talk about my approach to reading those books and the way I tend to squeeze the most out of each and every single magic book that I tend to read. So we're going to focus first on the type of book that's just effect followed by method. So you're going to have a book where it might just have essays, it might have other things, but this one is just solid effect method. You have the description of an effect followed by the method for said effect. So that's the first one that we're going to focus on. And in this case, I'm going to use the Art of Astonishment as an example. So the first thing that I tend to do is that I'll read the effect out. So I'll read the effect and I'll see what the effect is in the eyes of the creator of the book. In this case, Paul Harris, he might have a trick here called Counterfeit Spectator, where the dollar bill that a spectator possesses, the signature on a dollar bill changes visually to the actual signature of the participant as opposed to the treasure that's on the dollar bill. Great effect. So that's the first step of going through the book. I'll read the effect. Now, the next step is very, very important because I will try to come up with a method for that effect without reading the official one in the book. So where this is helpful is because it gets you thinking in your mindset. You obviously have been influenced by certain things in your magic career. You've been influenced by certain methods. You have a certain style. So I take the time to think about how I would do that particular effect, whether it would be with the use of an impromptu stooge or whether with a gimmick. I'll start thinking of possibilities, maybe switches on how to do that particular effect without reading the actual official one. And of course, I'll have some sort of application that I could write this in, whether Evernote or maybe pen and pencil. However it is that I choose to commit these, I'll write these down. But I'll come up with as many ways as to replicating that particular method as I possibly can without actually reading the actual method from the book. Now, this allows for more creativity, and you might actually come up with a better method than the one presented. After this step, I'll read the actual method itself. So I'll go through and I'll read the method. Maybe I might actually bring out the props, and I might bring out what it is that's required from the actual book itself or the actual official method itself. And I'll actually do it. So I'll try it and I will do my best to follow the steps individually. So at this point, you actually are left in a very interesting situation because you could combine both methods. You could pick one of the methods that you've made. You could have the method that's presented, and you could have the best of both worlds. So you could see whatever flaws are in the official version and see if your methods fix those flaws. Now, in the case of Paul Harris, he has that effect that I mentioned before, Counterfeit Spectator, which involves a very clever switch using a wallet. Now, in the Art of Astonishment, I don't necessarily like the switch that he uses. So in one of the original methods that I wrote up, I used that little bit of a gag where you put the bill in your wallet. You say, you gave me this bill, correct? You put it in your wallet, then you switch it in the case of a gag while the spectator is disarmed. That, I think, is a cleaner approach to this. Or maybe you could just do a false transfer with the bill as you're addressing different ways to test if the bill is actually fake. That's one method that I thought up without reading Paul Harris's actual method. However, I had no idea on how to actually get the signature off of the dollar bill. Paul Harris has a wonderful method of doing it, and I used his method and my switch, and I have a conglomerate effect that I think works infinitely better. And of course, I wouldn't have had that had I not thought up of the methods beforehand. The reason I like to think of the methods for that particular effect beforehand is because you're not influenced by the actual method presented. If you read the actual method presented in the book, then you become a little bit influenced, and that might hinder or that might kind of mutter your originality when coming up with your own methods. And then afterwards, it's pretty much just optimizing. So whatever method works best, you figure that out for that particular effect. and then it's just optimizing. You work on that particular individual trick, and when I feel comfortable with that particular trick, I'll move on to the next one. Now, the good thing about these books, these types of books, is that they're non sequitur. So you don't have to read the book in order. You could read the book in whatever order you want. And it really, really benefits in multiple viewings. So it really benefits from you coming back to the book, opening it up, and reading something new, because you're always going to find something new. You might find a little bit of a description in a trick that you glossed over that might help you out with a trick that you're currently working on. So it's always good to go back and reread books of this type where it's just effective method, because you're always going to get something from it. So that's the benefit of that. Now, when it comes to other books that are designed for beginners, such as Expert Card Technique, you can see how well worn my copy is. Those books are kind of designed for you to read it in order, and those books are designed for you to read it in the actual order presented, because they're teaching you. They're teaching you the sleights, they're teaching you the methods, they're teaching you how they particularly do those sleights, and then they use those sleights for the effects later on in the book. So those books, really, you don't have an option. However, look at the book multiple times. So read over the book multiple times, because you will find things in repeat viewings that you did not find in initial viewings. I find that it's very easy to dismiss certain books. So you might read Expert Card Technique, you might study the techniques, and then you might just step over, and then that's the end of it. Now, me personally, I've gone through this book with a fine-tooth comb, and as early as this month, I found ideas in this book that I have never even thought of, that are wonderful ideas and stuff that I work on for a long, long time, because they're that good. I wouldn't have done that had I not had a repeat viewing of the book, and had I not taken the opportunity to look at the book again and see if I could find some stuff. You're always going to find new stuff. You're always going to find stuff that you might have skipped over the first time. So I suggest work on something, and then you come back to a book later on, and you will definitely find something. So that's the way that I personally approach reading Magic books. Again, I've limited down to 2 books, so 2 types of books. You're going to find books that are designed for the beginner magician, or designed to teach you a certain series of sleights, followed by different methods and effects with those sleights. And then you have books that are just effect method. So hopefully you've learned a little bit of a way of how I approach that, and that might influence you. I know that it's a little tedious, and people tend to just want to read up on the actual method presented, but I think taking the time to not read the actual method yourself, and taking the time to come up with your own methods, really helps you out in the long run, because then you have a laundry list of potentially good optimized methods for the effects provided in the book. So take the time to do that with new books. Take the time to do that with old books. You might have old books such as Art of Astonishment, where you have forgotten the actual method presented, so you could go back through this technique and come up with different methods of your own. So thank you guys for being part of the Pick K Card Academy. This was a little bit of a short lesson here, just in hopes that you guys approach books a little bit differently, but I hope it helped you out at least a little bit. Thank you guys again for being part of the Academy, and I hope to see you on the next lesson.